Rain poured down like bullets, turning the emergency department entrance slick as ice. Oh, can you imagine the sheer danger in every step? A paramedic with long brown hair, her uniform soaked through and clinging to her skin, carried her emergency bag as she ran toward the ambulance bay, determination etched on her face. A nurse waved her off dismissively, snapping, "Paperwork first, oxygen second. This is a hospital, not the street." She paused for half a beat, then looked up with unwavering resolve. Oxygen before paperwork, divide hot cold, open corridor. 7 minutes later, the entire bay operated like a battlefield command center. Astonishing, right? The hospital stood speechless, utterly stunned by the transformation. Meet Nora Varga, 31 years old, of Austrian-Hungarian heritage, with long brown hair typically tied low at her neck in a simple, practical style. Her pale skin had an almost luminous quality that seemed to glow even in the dimmest light, and she possessed what people called cold beauty: sharp, elegant features softened by warm eyes and an extraordinary calmness that could steady anyone's nerves. She wore the standard paramedic uniform in charcoal gray, slip-resistant boots that had lost their shine from countless grueling shifts, and carried herself with quiet precision, like a silent force of nature. On her left wrist, a thin scar ran like a thread across her skin, a subtle mark of hidden battles. Her right index finger bore a callus across the first knuckle, details that spoke of experiences beyond her official record. Mysteries that begged the question, what trials had shaped this remarkable woman? St. Northwatch General Hospital sat directly on the coastal highway, where rain bands frequently struck without warning, unleashing chaos in an instant. Water would rush down toward the ambulance bay, creating treacherous whirlpools that turned routine patient transfers into hazardous operations fraught with peril. Nora worked with EMS Unit 47, operating from an aging ambulance that looked unremarkable from the outside but was meticulously maintained and fully equipped inside. The kind of vehicle that nobody praised but everyone depended on in their darkest hours, truly a lifesaver in disguise. The dismissal she faced was subtle but constant, wearing on her spirit day after day. "Paramedics are great on the street, but slow down when you get to the hospital," staff would say with a hint of condescension. "Where's your paperwork? Where's your missed report?" Others would comment on her slight build, whispering, "She looks too thin to lift patients properly. How does she even manage?" Nora would smile graciously and make notes in her personal logbook, documenting which ceiling areas leaked during storms, which doors tended to stick stubbornly, which lights dimmed during power fluctuations that could spell disaster. Her daily routine revealed a different story, one of quiet dedication that screamed heroism. At 5 a.m., she arrived early to check oxygen supplies, monitor batteries, epinephrine stocks, tourniquets, and flashlights maintenance work that nobody paid her to perform. Yet she did it with unwavering commitment, as if lives depended on it. Which they did. At 6 a.m., she walked the ambulance bay perimeter, placing anti-slip mats, positioning door wedges, and applying directional tape arrows to mark entrance and exit routes during heavy rain. Brilliant foresight, don't you think? At 9:40 p.m., she could still be found, returning a cervical collar that she had dried and cleaned, color-coding equipment for the next shift, ensuring everything was ready for whatever crisis might strike next. The institutional bias was most apparent during patient handoffs, moments that highlighted the tension like a spotlight. During a previous call, Nora had brought in a patient with respiratory failure, gasping desperately for air. The receiving nurse demanded paperwork before allowing oxygen administration. Unbelievable, prioritizing forms over a life. "Oxygen before paperwork, please open the pathway," Nora had said calmly, her voice a beacon of reason. A young doctor had snapped back sharply. "Are you trying to teach doctors proper procedure?" Nora had stepped back half a pace, opened the oxygen valve with her left hand, and maintained eye contact without changing expression, her poise unbreakable. Instead of arguing with assessments or defending herself, Nora observed and adapted, turning potential conflict into quiet progress. Oh, what grace under pressure! During each heavy rainstorm, she counted the rhythm of water drainage from roof gutters, listening intently like a symphony conductor. When the rhythm slowed, the bay would flood within minutes, disaster looming. She repositioned ambulances strategically, heavier vehicles in elevated corners, lighter ones in lower areas, changes that nobody questioned because they seemed logical and life-saving. The casual comments continued, adding to the emotional weight. A security guard at the rear entrance once joked lightly, "Pretty girl like you shouldn't be out in this weather." Nora had smiled slightly, replying with wisdom, "Rain doesn't care about appearance. Oxygen doesn't care about job titles." Profound, isn't it? Eric, the elderly supply manager with graying hair who supervised emergency inventory, had noticed Nora's attention to detail, admiring her from afar. He watched her replace batteries in evacuation lighting and remove hair and debris from ECG, electrode adhesives with meticulous care, each action a testament to her passion. He never asked questions but sometimes left extra waterproof tape rolls on her equipment cart, a silent gesture of respect that warmed the heart. The judgment was repetitive and predictable, chipping away at morale. A night shift nurse once declared firmly, "Paramedics are only good on the street. Inside the hospital, everything changes." Nora had nodded thoughtfully, responding, "Different, yes. That's why we need each other, unity in the face of division." In Nora's wallet, she always carried a small piece of scorched parachute fabric embroidered with 719, the exact time she had once opened an escape corridor for a trapped unit at Cora of Pass, a relic of heroism that stirred deep emotions. She never spoke about it, keeping her past shrouded in mystery. She only touched it briefly before each major storm, drawing strength from memories that must have been both painful and empowering. The call came at 12:07 p.m. as a cascading disaster, multiple vehicle collision on the coastal bridge, horror unfolding. 2 buses had skidded into head-on impact, and a diesel fuel truck had overturned, creating spill hazards across the roadway that threatened even more lives. St. Northwatch General declared mass casualty incident level 2 alert levels skyrocketing. The ambulance bay was already pooling with rainwater from the relentless downpour, a slippery nightmare. When Nora pulled her unit into the bay, she turned off the siren and opened the rear doors. Rain hammered the ambulance floor while her first patient, an elderly man with oxygen saturation at 86%, struggled for each breath, heart-wrenching to witness. The receiving nurse immediately blocked her path, insisting, "Forms first. Beds are occupied." Nora's response was calm but definitive, cutting through the tension. "Oxygen before paperwork. Divide hot-cold. Open corridor." The charge nurse in the emergency department arrived to intervene, declaring, "You don't have authority to direct hospital operations." Nora nodded respectfully, countering, "I'm directing the bay. I need 2 staff members and 1 security guard. Just give me 7 minutes, trust me." What happened next seemed like choreographed chaos, but every movement had purpose and precision that suggested extensive training in crisis management, exhilarating to behold. Nora flipped anti-slip mats into makeshift water collection barriers, diverting rainflow away from the oxygen supply entrance. The technique was improvised but executed with military-level efficiency, pure genius. She applied fresh directional arrows on the wet floor, creating a straight corridor from ambulance doors to the trauma bay. Her movements were economical, each action serving multiple purposes, maximizing every second. She positioned 2 plastic chairs as intermediate transfer points for patients who could walk independently, reducing bed congestion while maintaining dignity for those who needed assistance. Compassionate and clever. While moving, She called out oxygen before paperwork and placed masks on critical patients, delivering clear missed reports verbally during transport, seamless under pressure. Her medical assessments were remarkably accurate for someone working in challenging conditions, showcasing her incredible skill. She directed security to establish one-way traffic flow using frame barriers, entry right side, exit left side. The guards responded immediately, recognizing competent authority when they heard it, leadership in action. She distributed absorbent towels along slip-prone areas at the entrance steps, preventing a cascade of falls that could have created additional casualties, preventing tragedy before it struck. A small crisis emerged when family members rushed in with cell phones recording, nearly colliding with a stretcher in motion, chaos intensifying. Nora intercepted them with gentle but firm authority. "Cameras to that corner, oxygen happens here." Her voice wasn't loud, but something about the combination of rain-soaked urgency and clear logic made everyone step aside without argument, mesmerizing control. She turned the storm into a tactical advantage. Brilliant twist. Using a tarp from her ambulance, she created a wind barrier for the cold zone where patients who could wait were sheltered. The improvised structure was both functional and considerate, shielding the vulnerable. She stacked empty supply boxes into temporary steps so stretchers wouldn't slip on wet surfaces. Each modification addressed real hazards that others hadn't even noticed yet, foresight that saved lives. She applied tape to her gloves marked "Breath over Fear," a reminder for herself and her team that seemed oddly specific and practiced, echoing her inner strength. The final confrontation came when the same nurse who had demanded paperwork earlier complained loudly. "Oxygen first, paperwork later. Who's responsible for that?" Nora looked directly at her, asking pointedly, "Are you responsible for patients or for forms?" Silence, then a slow nod of understanding, as the nurse recognized the fundamental priority that had been temporarily forgotten, a moment of profound realization. 3 critical cases proceeded simultaneously, demonstrating Nora's ability to coordinate complex medical operations, impressive multitasking. Patient 1 reached the trauma bay with oxygen saturation improved to 93%. The respiratory support had been precisely calibrated during transport, flawless execution. Patient 2, suffering a femur fracture with moderate blood loss, received a tourniquet applied at the correct pressure point with time marked on the band using waterproof ink. The technique was textbook perfect perfection under duress. Patient 3, experiencing bronchial constriction, received nebulizer treatment that Nora prepared and handed off appropriately to nursing staff. Her medication knowledge was surprisingly extensive, a hidden depth revealed. A dangerous moment developed when diesel fumes drifted into the bay and someone attempted to light a cigarette to calm their nerves, reckless endangerment. Nora grasped the person's wrist, applying pressure at a specific anatomical point, enough discomfort to make them release the lighter without causing injury. The technique was precise and professional. "No flames near oxygen," she said clearly enough for 3 nearby areas to hear, commanding safety. Suddenly, a power fluctuation caused lighting to flicker and suction equipment to pause for several seconds, panic rising. Nora switched to flashlight illumination and called low light, the same command she had used in cafes and kitchens. And somehow everyone became calmer, responding to her tone rather than panicking about the equipment failure, her voice a soothing anchor. The bay functioned like a coordinated operation. Entry and exit routes remained clear. Hot zone near trauma rooms, cold zone under rain protection. Oxygen stations positioned immediately inside doors. Harmony in crisis. Doctors emerged to receive patients smoothly without bottlenecks or confusion. The handoffs were seamless, suggesting that Nora had anticipated their needs, intuitive brilliance. A department supervisor whispered to a colleague, "Who organized this setup?" Curiosity piqued. The transformation was complete. What had been chaos 7 minutes earlier now operated with military precision. Unbelievable turnaround. Every person knew their role. Every pathway served its purpose. Every critical patient received immediate attention while stable cases waited comfortably. But the most remarkable aspect wasn't the efficiency. It was how natural it felt, effortless magic. Nobody was shouting orders or creating drama. The system simply worked because someone had created structure where none had existed. Nora's quiet revolution. Dr. Miller, an emergency physician who had previously served as a military medic, observed Nora's technique and noticed details that others missed. The precise placement of tourniquets, the way she assessed respiratory distress without equipment, the automatic prioritization of airway management, subtle signs of expertise. When he noticed the specific callus pattern on her index finger and the thin scar on her wrist, recognition began to dawn, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. On Nora's left wrist was a thin red cord tied with 3 precise knots, a symbol laden with meaning. When an older nurse asked about it, she simply said, 3 times without lights, 3 people still alive. Then she pulled her sleeve down to cover it, modesty veiling valor. After 7 minutes, the rain continued, but the crisis had stabilized, relief washing over everyone. Patient 1 was breathing steadily. Patient 2 had been transferred to surgery, and patient 3's wheezing had subsided significantly. The ambulance bay experienced a rare moment of calm amid the storm, a precious breather. Dr. Lawson, the emergency department chief, stepped outside, still processing what he had witnessed. His 20 years of emergency medicine had never included anything quite like the coordination he had just observed, mind-blowing. Who established the corridor system and zone divisions? He asked directly, seeking answers. A nurse pointed toward Nora. She did, the paramedic. Dr. Lawson studied her with new interest, noting details he had missed during the crisis, eyes opening to her true capabilities. What's your name and where did you learn to use weather conditions for tactical organization? Nora's response was characteristically brief. Places without Wi-Fi where rain is neutral, you just give it the right job to do. Dr. Miller, the former military medic, approached with growing suspicion. His eyes narrowing in intrigue. Could this unassuming paramedic really hold such secrets? He had been observing the callus pattern on her index finger and the thin scar on her wrist, marks that told a story of prolonged weapons handling and high-stress operations, evoking memories of intense battles long past. Have you ever maintained heavy equipment for more than 200 hours continuously? He asked pointedly, his voice laced with curiosity and challenge. Nora paused for half a second, her composure unbroken. I've maintained things heavier than equipment, decisions. Oh, the response carried such profound weight that it made Dr. Miller step closer, his heart quickening with recognition. He had heard similar language from special operations personnel who had carried responsibilities that went far beyond standard military service, burdens that shaped souls in unbreakable ways. Eric, the elderly supply manager, had been watching the entire operation with knowing eyes, a subtle smile hinting at his deep admiration. He approached a storage cabinet and placed a steel-wrapped pen engraved with K11 Delta on a nearby stainless steel table, the item gleaming mysteriously under the dim lights. Dr. Lawson touched the item and looked up questioningly, his brow furrowed in confusion. What could this mean? Someone left this behind once, Eric explained quietly, his tone filled with quiet reverence. Today I saw someone who knows how to use it. The significance wasn't lost on Dr. Miller, who recognized the marking system used by classified units. Oh, the flood of memories it triggered. His own military experience had brought him into contact with special operations personnel, and he understood the implications of that particular designation, implications that spoke of elite shadows and unspoken valor. 20 minutes later, a vehicle arrived at the hospital entrance, tires splashing through puddles dramatically. Lieutenant Commander Marcus emerged, wearing a rain-soaked jacket that clung to his frame, his expression serious and purposeful, radiating urgency. Dr. Lawson had made a phone call, his voice urgent with excitement. We just witnessed someone coordinate emergency response with exceptional skill under impossible conditions. You might want to know about this. The pause on the other end had been telling, heavy with implication. Name? Nora Varga. Marcus's response was immediate, decisive. I'm on my way. When Marcus entered the ambulance bay and saw the red cord with 3 knots on Nora's wrist, his entire approach changed, softening with awe. Could this be the legend in flesh? He had worked with enough classified personnel to recognize the significance of that particular identifier, a symbol of extraordinary feats. Ghost 11, he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly with respect. At core of past 719, when radio communications failed, you opened the corridor for 8 people to escape. Today you opened a corridor for an entire hospital, astonishing parallels. The bay fell completely silent, the air thick with emotion. Hospital staff who had been moving equipment paused in their work, frozen in disbelief. The nurse who had insisted on paperwork before Oxygen lowered her head, her cheeks flushing with regret. I apologize, she stammered, her voice breaking. But Nora didn't embrace the recognition or use it to justify her earlier actions, staying humble amid the spotlight. Patients are still in treatment rooms, medical review before applause, she replied firmly, redirecting focus to what truly mattered. Dr. Lawson nodded, his attitude shifting from defensive to educational, a wave of humility washing over him. He was beginning to understand that he had witnessed something far more significant than good crisis management, a true masterclass in heroism. An impromptu debrief session began right there in the rain, water pattering around them like applause from the skies. Nora drew diagrams on wet tarp using waterproof markers, her movements precise and practiced, each stroke deliberate and inspiring. Oxygen paper. Establish airway before documentation. Hot, cold, separate immediate intervention from cases that can wait. Corridor, entry, and exit paths that don't intersect. Rain is an opponent when you fear it, an ally when you assign it a role. She explained, her words resonating with timeless wisdom. Her teaching style was direct and practical, focused on principles that could be applied immediately, empowering everyone in earshot. Dr. Miller asked about her medical assessment techniques, his curiosity piqued. You identified multiple conditions without standard diagnostic equipment. How? Breathing patterns, skin color, pupil response? Nora replied simply. 3 indicators that work regardless of available technology. Trust what you can observe directly, profoundly reliable. The most challenging question came from Dr. Lawson, his tone earnest. Would you consider joining our hospital's disaster response leadership program? No names, no photographs, Nora replied modestly. Just outdoor simulations during storm conditions, practical and real. A phone call from hospital administration interrupted the discussion, the ring cutting through the moment like a siren. The medical director's voice was urgent, demanding answers. Who organized the bay operations? A paramedic named Nora Varga, Dr. Lawson answered, pride swelling in his chest. I wanted to debrief with executive leadership as soon as the weather clears. But perhaps the most human moment came when Nora noticed family members of patient 2 struggling with wet paperwork outside, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion, heartbreaking vulnerability. She provided them with her rain jacket, draping it over their shoulders warmly, and guided their hands as they signed surgical consent forms, her touch steady and reassuring. Now it's time for paperwork, she said gently with a soft smile. Oxygen has handled relief at last. The revelation recontextualized everything the hospital staff had observed. Nora's calm authority during crisis, her immediate recognition of life-threatening symptoms, her ability to organize complex logistics without creating conflict. Oh, the pieces fell into place so beautifully. It all made sense now. She wasn't a street paramedic who had gotten lucky during an emergency. She was an experienced operative who had chosen to apply special operations skills in civilian medical service, a selfless pivot that inspired awe. The red cord with 3 knots represented 3 occasions when she had maintained operations without electrical power, and 3 people who had survived because of her ability to function in impossible conditions, triumphs born from sheer will. The embroidered fabric marked 719 commemorated the exact time she had opened an escape corridor at Cora Pass, allowing her unit to extract successfully under hostile fire, a moment of pure bravery etched in time. Her presence at St. Northwatch General wasn't coincidental, far from it. She had deliberately chosen emergency medical service as a way to continue protecting people who needed immediate assistance, channeling her past into present good. The early morning equipment checks, the strategic positioning of safety equipment, the emergency protocols she had quietly established, all of it demonstrated ongoing commitment to saving lives, a dedication that touched hearts deeply. But perhaps most significantly, her response during the mass casualty incident had elevated everyone's performance transformative impact. Hospital staff had functioned more effectively because she had created clear structure and eliminated dangerous confusion. She had demonstrated that leadership in medical emergencies required calm assessment rather than loud authority, and that effective coordination could happen regardless of official hierarchy. Revolutionary insight. The 3-command framework, oxygen before paperwork, divide hot-cold, open quarter, represented principles that could be applied in countless emergency medical situations. Timeless tools. More than technical knowledge, she had shown that competence and service could exist anywhere, often in the most unexpected roles, challenging assumptions delightfully. Dr. Lawson approached as the debrief concluded, his expression grateful. The phrase oxygen before paperwork was painful to hear but absolutely correct. Thank you. Nora nodded humbly. I learned it during storms like this one. I owe a debt. If someone has ever kept your breathing stable before paperwork could reach the desk. Profound gratitude. After the storm passed, real changes appeared throughout St. Northwatch General Hospital. Exciting evolution. A small sign was installed in the ambulance bay. Oxygen paper hot-cold corridor with directional arrows, a constant reminder. The anti-slip mats were permanently modified with hinges to function as water collection barriers, just as Nora had improvised. Ingenious upgrades. Low light switches were installed along the drainage system to reduce panic responses during power fluctuations, enhancing safety remarkably. Nora began conducting outdoor simulation training for nursing staff, security guards, and patient transport personnel, the people who rarely received advanced emergency training, empowering the unsung heroes. She didn't teach medication protocols or complex medical procedures. She taught pathways and priorities. Anyone can maintain corridors, push a stretcher, clear a slip hazard, hold a door open, she explained during sessions, her enthusiasm infectious. On the whiteboard in the morning briefing room, someone had written in uneven handwriting, oxygen before paperwork, divide hot, cold, open quarter. Below that, breath over fear, inspiring words that lingered. The impact spread throughout different hospital departments, rippling waves of change. Pediatrics adopted the corridor concept for separate pathways during seizure emergencies, improving care dramatically. Obstetrics created low-light poster protocols for pregnancy loss counseling, reducing sympathetic nervous system activation while increasing respect and dignity. Compassionate innovation. Security staff implemented the directional hand signal system, entry right, exit left, streamlining operations. The most meaningful personal moment came when the nurse who had originally insisted on paperwork before oxygen brought Nora a cup of hot tea, her eyes misty with remorse. I apologize for prioritizing forms over airways, she said quietly. Nora accepted the cup gratefully, replying warmly, on rainy days everyone gets wet. Let's just dry the anger first. Forgiveness in action. Small markers of Nora's influence appeared throughout the hospital, subtle tributes. Carved discreetly under the bay door handle were the words 70019, open corridor. Inside the oxygen supply cabinet, a small piece of colored tape bore handwritten words, "If panicking, follow arrows, practical wisdom." The changes weren't just procedural. They were cultural, deeply transformative. Staff members began recognizing that emergency competence could come from unexpected sources. The quiet paramedic who seemed unremarkable might possess skills that could save multiple lives during critical moments. Eye-opening realization. More importantly, the three-command framework became part of informal hospital culture, passed from experienced staff to new employees. Establish airways before documentation. Separate critical cases from stable ones. Maintain clear pathways for movement enduring legacy. Dr. Lawson made an unannounced visit to observe one of Nora's training sessions, his interest genuine. He watched how she supported each individual participant, offering specific guidance tailored to their particular responsibilities and challenges personalized excellence. Before leaving, he added one line to the whiteboard. "Today I learned emergency medicine from a paramedic. That's the best thing that can happen to a doctor." The session participants laughed with genuine appreciation rather than embarrassment, joyful camaraderie. The most significant long-term impact was how the experience changed staff attitudes toward interprofessional collaboration paradigm shift. They learned to identify and value competence regardless of official job titles or departmental hierarchies. Future emergency situations at St. North Watch were handled with notably improved coordination, smoother than ever. Staff members applied Nora's principles automatically. Airway stabilization before bureaucratic requirements, logical triage separation, and clear traffic flow management. Years later, the hospital personnel would remember not just the technical skills they had learned, but the lesson that expertise could exist anywhere, and that the most important contributions often came from people who didn't seek recognition for their knowledge. Timeless inspiration. Type "I will live with dignity" if you believe skills and calm can transform a rainy day into a learning day for an entire hospital. Titles fall before the storm when clouds tear up in the sky. Dramatic truth. Hospital or street makes no difference. Only airways and pathways matter. Paramedic or doctor, our role's oxygen before paperwork is the reason Nora applied arrows, positioned wedges, changed batteries, work nobody applauded, unsung efforts. Then in 7 minutes, invisible preparation became visible difference, breathtaking reveal. Rain isn't the enemy. Rain is force. We choose to use it or endure it. Empowering perspective. Corridors through rain are metaphors amid chaos. Open one straight path for anyone standing at any entrance. You might be a nurse, paramedic, porter, security guard, or volunteer. Anyone can rise. Choose 3 commands for where you stand. Apply 1 arrow. Open 1 corridor. When someone says paperwork first, respond gently but clearly. Oxygen first, gentle firmness. Nora's story teaches us that confidence exists everywhere, often in the most unexpected roles. Surprising discovery. The person arriving soaked from the storm might have skills that could organize an entire emergency response. Hidden potential. We live in institutions that prioritize process over outcomes, documentation over intervention. But real expertise often chooses positions based on where lives can be saved, not where recognition can be earned. Thought-provoking contrast. How many times have you dismissed someone because of their current assignment? How often have you assumed that protocol matters more than immediate human need? Nora could have leveraged her Ghost 11 background for prestigious positions, and administrative authority opportunities abound. Instead, she chose to serve people who needed immediate assistance, applying special operations principles to civilian emergency medicine. Selfless choice. Her approach demonstrates that influence doesn't require official authority. Eye-opening. Leadership in crisis situations comes from confidence and clarity, not from hierarchy or loud commands. The 3-command framework she established, oxygen before paperwork, divide hot-cold, open corridor, represents principles that apply far beyond medical emergencies. They're about prioritizing human need over bureaucratic procedure, creating logical organization during chaos, and maintaining clear paths forward, universal lessons. Most importantly, Nora's story shows us that service takes many forms, diverse and beautiful. Skills developed in special operations can serve people through teaching, through preventing small problems from becoming fatal ones, through ensuring that life-saving resources reach those who need them, most impactful applications. When you encounter someone being dismissed or overlooked because they don't fit institutional expectations, remember that competence doesn't always announce itself. Vital reminder. When you're in positions to evaluate others, look for evidence of practical capability alongside official credentials. When you find yourself with knowledge that could help others, remember that the most important teaching often happens during real emergencies. Between people ready to learn and people willing to act without seeking credit. True collaboration. Nora's story reminds us that excellence doesn't need announcements, like her 3 precise commands during the storm. Quiet, effective, but absolutely decisive when breathing depended on it. Powerful essence. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to The Veteran's Story. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI authentic voices.